Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Dr. Rohrscheib. I'm the head sleep expert and neuroscientist at Wesper, and today's topic that we're covering is sleep hygiene. So many of you have probably heard about sleep hygiene, but maybe you don't know everything about sleep hygiene. And that's where I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna help you understand the ins and outs of sleep hygiene and why it's so important to get good quality sleep. I'm gonna cover a few topics today. The first is, what is sleep hygiene? And why is it important? Why do we need sleep hygiene in our life to get good quality sleep? The next topic is my top 10 sleep hygiene behaviors that I recommend that you start adopting now in order to improve your sleep. And then finally, I'm going to talk to you about how to conduct a sleep hygiene audit so you can identify areas of your life that could be improved, or certain things that maybe you're doing during the day that is affecting your sleep later on, and how to go about that process. So let's dive into what is sleep hygiene. So as you're all aware, literally everything in our life can affect the quality of our sleep, from our lifestyle, our behaviors, the foods we eat, our hobbies, our jobs, the comfort of our house. There are so many different things that can affect our sleep, and we can offset those things by adapting good sleep hygiene practices. And good sleep hygiene practices are any behavior or lifestyle modification that you adopt that will ultimately improve the overall quality of your sleep. Now, conversely, there's also poor hygiene habits. So these are negative things that you do throughout the day that can negatively impact your sleep. We'll also touch on those too. Why do you need sleep hygiene? Well, it's simple. Clinical research has shown us for decades that if you do certain things in your life, if you make certain changes, you're more likely to get better sleep. We also know that certain bad habits that I'll talk about later negatively impact your sleep. And this is very, very well studied. So we know somebody that is a poor sleeper, when they start adopting good sleep hygiene habits, we would expect them to experience more consistent, high quality, restful sleep at night. And it can also help improve people who have sleep disorders. So if you have something like insomnia or sleep apnea, adding good sleep hygiene practices on top of those sleep disorders can really aid in your treatment of those sleep disorders. Now, we're going to talk about my top 10 most important sleep hygiene tips. Now, I'm going to go over my top 10, and these are things you should think about adopting as soon as possible. But I'll also provide some information after this talk, so some links that you can go to in order to expand on some sleep hygiene tips that I didn't cover. And my number one tip is keeping a very strict sleep schedule. This means going to bed and waking up at the same time every single day, no exceptions. That includes weekends and holidays and vacations. So you're gonna go to bed at the same time every single night, and you're gonna set your alarm for the same time every single morning. Now, why is this so essential? Well, sleep is partially regulated by something called a circadian rhythm. That is a 24-hour biological clock in your brain that keeps track of the day and tells our body to do a number of things. It tells our body to release hormones at certain times of the day. It tells our body to feel hungry at certain times of the day. And one of the biggest things that your circadian rhythm regulates is when you're asleep and when you're awake. And that's why most people are gonna feel tired at night, because our circadian rhythm is very dictated by light sensory input, so light from the sun. So obviously when it's day, you're getting a lot of light. At night, you're not getting so much light. And our brain's circadian rhythm can tell exactly what time of day it is and put you to bed when you need to go to bed. So what happens when we don't sleep to a specific sleep schedule? Well, if we're going to bed at 10 one night and midnight at another night, it's really hard for our circadian rhythm to stay regulated and organized because there's no set schedule it's trying to regulate your sleep to. It just confuses the brain. So even if you want to go to bed at 10 p.m. at one night, if your circadian rhythm is not properly keeping track of time, it might not make you feel tired until 1 in the morning. But we know that when people consistently go to bed at the same time, your circadian rhythm is gonna click in and it's gonna start making you feel tired 1 to 2 hours before your bedtime, every single time, guaranteed. Now, on the opposite end, you also have to wake up at the same time of day because your circadian rhythm needs to be regulated at both sides. And so doing that is going to make a massive improvement, not only in your ability to fall asleep, but stay asleep. So how do you actually improve your sleep schedule? Well, it depends. You know, if your sleep schedule is almost normal, but maybe could use some improvement, that's going to be easy for most people. If you have a really extreme sleep schedule, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. So fixing your schedule in baby steps is going to be key to improving your circadian rhythm and your sleep schedule. So if you, for instance, have been on a really late night schedule, maybe you go to bed at 2, but you want to go to bed at 11, you're going to want to slowly wind back your clock over time. I usually say go to bed a half an hour early every week or so. So if you're going to bed at 2 in the morning, for 1 week you would go to bed at 1:30, and then the next week you would go to bed at 1, and you just keep doing that until you land on the time that you want your sleep schedule to fall on. Same with your wake time. One thing to note, that it is very important that you set a sleep schedule that allows you to get at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, because that's how much sleep a healthy adult requires to maintain health. Number 2, very, very important. And this is almost as important as setting a strict sleep schedule. Now, most of us are a bit stressed out, and for a variety of reasons. The world is just a stressful place in general. We're all working crazy hours. We have a lot of priorities. So we don't often give ourselves enough time to really wind down before bed. And this is a problem, right? Because when we're stressed, we raise our cortisol levels. That's your stress hormone. And when your cortisol levels are quite high in your system, that is very wake promoting. That is very stimulating. Stress also causes a racing, overactive mind, and that can make falling asleep very difficult. So the goal is to give yourself enough time before bed to allow yourself to unwind and de-stress. So my recommendation is at least 2 hours before your set bedtime, you should be taking steps to relax. And that includes putting away stressful activities such as work or priorities or chores, and doing something that is relaxing for you. That could be something like taking a bath, reading a book, maybe watching a show that you like, something that's gonna help you take your mind off of the stress of the day. Number 3 is create a pre-sleep bedtime routine. Okay, so this is actually incorporated into the de-stress routine, right? So you're gonna wanna start de-stressing 2 hours before bed, but then your bedtime routine is gonna kick in about an hour or a half an hour before bed. Now, your bedtime routine is going to be a series of things that you do exactly the same every single night, and doing the exact same thing, the exact same routine every single night is gonna send a signal to your brain that it's bedtime, that it's time to start feeling tired. So this may be something like yoga, meditation, deep breathing exercises. Maybe you take a bath, maybe you do a puzzle, maybe you have a routine getting into comfortable pajamas. But the goal is to make sure it's reproducible. Because when something is reproducible, our brain remembers that, and it helps our brain keep track of when it's time to go to bed. So coming up with a half an hour of a bedtime routine to do every single night, you can write it down, or you can just do it naturally. So maybe you just like to read, you can just start reading. Is absolutely ideal to get good quality sleep and help you fall asleep faster. Number 4 is maintaining a comfortable bedroom. This is very important, and I think a lot of us use our bedroom for things that don't necessarily involve sleep or romance. And while I understand that, maybe you have a very small apartment, or maybe you just like spending a lot of time in your room, that the temptation to have a lot of stuff in your room is high. So most people have a TV in their bedroom. Most people have other electronics and other things in their bedroom. But the bedroom should really be a sanctuary. It really should be a place of rest. So removing stimulation and clutter is really important for helping our brain make the association between the bedroom and sleep, or the bedroom and romance, and nothing else. So eliminating the TV or decluttering or making the bedroom more comfortable like a sanctuary is really important. The other things that are really essential for a bedroom is that it should be dark. Okay, so no light pollution from the outside. You know, if you have a street lamp or you live in a city, you know, you want to try to minimize the amount of light coming into your bedroom. You can use blackout blinds, or you can put a blanket up, or you can put sticky covers on your windows. There's a bunch of different things you can do. Worst case scenario, if you can't eliminate light pollution, you can always wear a good eye mask at night. The other thing is you should be keeping your bedroom cool. So the ideal sleeping temperature is going to be about 66 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. This is well researched by science. We know that the body has to cool down before it can really initiate sleep and stay asleep. And also, it's very uncomfortable to sleep in a hot, stuffy room. So keeping your bedroom temperature a little bit cooler is going to be really important. And finally, making sure your bedroom is nice and quiet. So eliminating things that cause noise from your bedroom, like a TV, or if you have animals in your bedroom that make a lot of noise, maybe consider having them sleep in another room. You know, if you are in a city or have a lot of traffic, you can always wear earplugs or noise canceling headphones to sleep, but that's also very important. Other things you can try would be a white noise machine, which is going to help block out noise pollution that could disturb your sleep. Number 5 is making sure at the end of your night, at least an hour before you go to bed, you start dimming all of your lights, okay? And so what I mean is trying to exist by as little light possible for the hour before you go to bed. And this is really important. So we're going to jump back to our circadian rhythm again and talk about how light influences our circadian rhythm. So, as I said earlier, your circadian rhythm keeps track of time with light sensory information. So what happens is when light enters our eyes, it stimulates a nerve, and that sends a signal to the brain to suppress a hormone called melatonin. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard of melatonin before. You can buy it at the drugstore. You know, it's a sleep aid. But melatonin is our circadian rhythm regulating hormone. So when melatonin is suppressed and it's very low in the brain, we're very alert, we're very energized, we're not going to be able to sleep. Now, as it gets darker throughout the day and into the night, that tells the brain to increase its production of melatonin. So our melatonin levels are going to go up. And when they reach a certain threshold in the brain, that's when our brain is going to know when to initiate sleep. So we need our melatonin levels to get nice and high in order to have good quality sleep. Now, what happens when you have bright lights in your house, or you're looking at a mobile device or a laptop that has a lot of light, is that you're confusing your brain. You're tricking your brain into thinking it is sunlight, and that's going to suppress your melatonin. So by dimming all the lights in your house, maybe you just use a low light reading lamp, and putting away the electronic devices, you're helping your brain create the melatonin it needs. Now, if you're somebody who absolutely refuses to stop using their electronics, I understand it's hard. Most of us want to look at our cell phone before we go to bed. I don't recommend it, but if you can't get away from that habit, make sure that you turn the light as far down as you can on your mobile device, your phone or your laptop. Another thing you can do is wear light blocking glasses. So they filter out that light that specifically causes us to stop making melatonin. Again, ideally you wouldn't use those devices, but if you have to, take steps to minimize the impact of those lights. And that brings me to my next tip, which is no electronics. I don't really have to go into that, we just did, so that kind of goes with dim lighting, but just making sure that you put away the electronics at least an hour before bed. I will say that Kindles are usually fine because the light from a Kindle is not as strong as your cell phone. So if you like to read off your Kindle, that's fine, you can continue doing so. That shouldn't impact your sleep too much. The next one is gonna be stop using caffeine too late in the day. And I think most people know this, right? This is one of those things we all really understand, is that drinking things like coffee or energy drinks or black teas, it's very stimulating. It helps us stay awake, it energizes us. The problem is that caffeine stays in our system for a really, really long time. And many of us don't allow the caffeine to leave our system completely before we go to bed. Now, for healthy adults who don't have a ton of sleep issues, we recommend that you cut off all caffeine containing drinks and foods at least 6 hours before your bedtime. If you are somebody who really struggles with your sleep and maybe you find it really difficult to fall asleep, or maybe you find that your sleep is really restless at night, you need to extend that time out. So I would recommend for poor sleepers at least 8 hours before your last caffeine consumption and going to bed at night. It's also very important to keep in mind that there's a lot of products with hidden caffeine in them. This includes foods and various drinks that you wouldn't assume have caffeine in them. So make sure that you're checking labels to make sure what you're consuming does not have hidden caffeine. Next one is no food within 2 hours of bedtime. So, some of us eat relatively late, or some of us like to have a snack before bed. And it affects more people than others, but for the most part, when your stomach is very heavy with food, and it can take a while for your food to digest, it can make you very bloated and uncomfortable, and it can make it very difficult to fall asleep. Some foods can be irritating, especially when we're in the sleeping position. So greasy foods, spicy foods, rich foods, when we're lying down, that can cause issues like heartburn or acid reflux and gas and a whole bunch of problems that make sleeping very uncomfortable. So the rule of thumb is to give yourself at least a 2 to 3 hour window between the time you eat and the time that you go to bed. Now, you don't want to go too much longer than that, because you want to make sure that your blood sugar is nice and stable when you're sleeping, because if you have a massive blood sugar drop while you're sleeping, that can actually wake you up, because your brain is basically saying, I need to get up and I need to eat to raise my blood sugar levels. So, don't eat too far out from bed, but don't eat too close either. Next one is making sure you get your exercise during the day. And again, we've all heard this a million times, like we need to exercise to maintain health. Yes, that is true, but it's also really important for sleep as well. We know that people who get at least 30 to 60 minutes of physical exercise just have better sleep quality, and there's a ton of different reasons for that. One, healthier people in general just sleep better. But two, exercise can help reduce cortisol in the blood. And going back to cortisol, which I talked to you about earlier, cortisol raises stress, but cortisol doesn't just raise stress, it also makes you feel very awake and energized. So exercising earlier in the day can help reduce those cortisol stores and reduce cortisol levels in the blood, and that can make us more relaxed and make it easier for us to fall asleep. So ideally you would be exercising in the first half of the day, because we don't actually want you to exercise too close to bedtime, because that can have the opposite effect. If you exercise too close to bed, then you're going to be too stimulated, and then that doesn't really play into the 2 hours of relaxing before bed. So yes, get exercise, but make sure you do it earlier in the day so it doesn't affect your sleep. Finally, my last one, number 10, is conversely from what we were talking about dimming the lights at night. Make sure that you're getting enough daylight and sun exposure during the day. And this goes back to our circadian rhythm again. You know, we need it to be nice and dim and dark at night to create that melatonin, but we also need it to be nice and light so that our brain suppresses that melatonin during the day, because that really helps keep our circadian rhythm well regulated. I think you guys are getting the point. Our circadian rhythm is extremely important in our sleep quality, and we need to do every single thing we can to make sure that we're well regulated, okay? So light time during the day, low light at night is gonna keep your circadian rhythm nice and happy. So those are my top 10 sleep hygiene tips, and honestly, that only scratches the surface. There are so many more. So like I said, I'm gonna throw some links up at the end where you can go visit some websites that talk in depth about a huge list of things that you can do to improve your sleep quality. Let's talk about conducting a sleep hygiene audit on your life. So I've given you all the tips, but we've got to figure out which ones are actually going to work for you and which ones are going to make the biggest impact. So I always recommend that every quarterly, so every 4 months, 3 to 4 months or so in the year, you go through the list of sleep hygiene habits and you identify problem areas that you can work on. So you're going to go down the list, and I would recommend writing down the top 5 that are problematic for you. And so you make that list every 3 to 4 months, and then you slowly, so you give yourself a few weeks to a month to work on these habits. You slowly either incorporate good sleep hygiene habits or break bad sleep hygiene habits. And once you're consistently doing those, you stick to them rigorously and try to do them every single day. But it's really important to constantly remind yourself, remember to do your sleep hygiene. So doing something like keeping a sleep diary where you write down your nightly activities, or you could record it in a spreadsheet, can be very, very helpful for poor sleepers. So what I want you to do after watching this video is think about the top 10 sleep hygiene habits I listed, and think about whether you are kind of bad at following those and whether it's something you can make some changes with. Now, I can't really go through how to make those improvements in an in-depth way because we only have so much time in this webinar, but what you can do is, let's say you want to work on your sleep schedule. All you have to do is go to a website like the Sleep Foundation or the CDC and look up, how do I improve my sleep schedule? And it's going to provide you a wealth of information. Or you can make a consultation with me or contact me via email, tell me your situation, and I can help you come up with some improvements to your sleep schedule. And of course, that is the same for all those sleep hygiene tips and all of the sleep hygiene tips I have not mentioned. That brings us to the end of our sleep hygiene video. There is so much I've left out. We're running out of time here, but please go and do some more reading, educate yourself, and start doing that sleep hygiene audit today. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to talking about our next topic in the next webinar. Again, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me via email. My name is Chelsea, that's Chelsie, and that's Chelsea at Wesper, Wesper.co. Good luck with your sleep hygiene and get some great rest.